Tonight, you're going to be the most feared man in human history. Not a general, not an emperor. You are Genghis Khan. And yes, you will unite the Mongol tribes, crush kingdoms beneath your horse's hooves, and become the storm that reshaped the known world. But first, you'll have to kill your brother, sleep in frozen grass with nothing but a horse for warmth, get kidnapped, get betrayed, and claw your way out of starvation, exile, and death, with nothing but your fists, your fury, and a taste for blood. See, people love to romanticize power. They think Genghis Khan had it all. Wives by the hundreds, riches, palaces, obedient armies. But nobody ever talks about what it took to get there. The betrayals, the frostbite, the trust issues, the psychological trauma of executing your childhood best friend just to hold onto your throne. And that is not even counting the chronic diarrhea from drinking fermented horse milk every day. Here's the twist. You wouldn't last one single day. Not just because you'd be physically broken, but because mentally, emotionally, politically, spiritually, being Genghis Khan wasn't badass. It was brutal, exhausting, lonely, a non-stop parade of blood, battles, and unshakable paranoia. Now, before we saddle up and drag your enemies behind wild horses, a quick note. Everything you're about to hear is based on historical records, archaeological evidence, and first-hand Mongol chronicles. No capes, no fantasy. Just raw, dusty history from the edge of the known world. So if you're still awake, light a candle, get comfortable under the stars, and let's find out just how fast you'd break down if you were born into one of the harshest upbringings in human history. Because your story doesn't start with a crown. It starts with a curse. Your name is Temujin, and you're born in the middle of nowhere. Not the cute kind of middle of nowhere. We're talking frozen, unmarked steppe. No roads, no laws, no Netflix. Just wind, wolves, and warring clans who think stabbing someone over a sheep is reasonable. You're the son of a tribal chieftain named Yasuge, and for the first few years you're actually doing okay. Your dad arranges a marriage for you at age 9, which, in Mongol society, is basically middle-aged, and you're sent off to live with your future in-laws. But then, just when life starts to settle, everything collapses. Your father is poisoned by a rival clan on his way back from dropping you off, and with no one left to protect your family, your tribe immediately abandons you, your mother, and your 6 siblings to die alone in the wild. You learn quickly that loyalty is a fair-weather friend, so you're about 10 years old, starving in the grasslands, eating roots and rodents, while your mother, Holan, a fierce woman who was kidnapped herself in her youth, tries to keep you all alive. And it's not just the hunger gnawing at you, it's the betrayal. The realization that no one is coming. That survival depends entirely on how ruthless you're willing to become. And soon, it begins. Your older half-brother, Bekta, starts hoarding food. You're hungry, angry, and no one is in charge anymore. So one day you grab a bow, walk up to him, and shoot him dead. Welcome to Mongol conflict resolution. That's your first kill. It won't be your last. Not by a long shot. Over the next few years you scrape by. Barely. You fish. You hunt. You steal. You fight off raiders. At one point you get captured by another clan and thrown into a wooden prison collar that digs into your flesh every time you move. You escape. You return. And slowly, piece by piece, you start building something no one in your blood-soaked world understands. Loyalty. Not the fake kind. Not the I'll support you until you trip kind. Real loyalty. Loyalty to the death. You find men who are as angry, broken, and ambitious as you are. You reward them not by bloodline, but by merit. And that's revolutionary. In a world where clans rise and fall based on family name, you create a new code, a new way. You're not just a warrior, you're a myth in progress. And that's when they start calling you Genghis Khan, universal ruler. But here's the part people forget. You're still sleeping on the ground, still bathing once a season, still getting hit in the face with arrows. You ride for days with no food. You execute friends who betray you. You murder rivals before they can poison your water supply. You lose more than you win, but you always come back. And when you finally unite the Mongol tribes under one banner, it's not with speeches, it's with conquest, with clever diplomacy and calculated terror. You burn entire cities to the ground to send a message, and that message is, do not defy the Khan. Eventually the world starts to whisper your name like it's a curse. You're ruling an empire larger than Rome, larger than Alexander. You've crushed kingdoms in China, Persia and Central Asia. You've built a postal system, an organised military and a legal code known as the Yasa. But you've also left rivers choked with bodies, skull pyramids outside city gates, and tens of millions dead in your wake. And at night, when you sleep beneath stars the same colour as blood, you dream of betrayal, of old friends with new knives, of sons who hate you, of women who plot in silk-draped tents. Because power, real power, doesn't comfort you, it consumes you. So yes, you're the most powerful man on earth, but you're also the most hunted, the most haunted. You've gone from starving child to godlike conqueror, but the hunger never stopped. And that's why you wouldn't survive a day in his boots. Because being Genghis Khan, it wasn't power, it was punishment. Now, let's step back a bit and walk through the brutal childhood that shaped you. The betrayal, starvation, and first kill that lit the fire inside you. Because that's where your reign of terror truly begins. You're 9 years old, and everything you've ever known has just shattered like a frozen rib bone under a warhorse. Your father is dead, poisoned by a rival tribe with a bowl of fermented mare's milk and a fake smile. One moment, you're the son of a respected chieftain. The next, you're nothing, not a prince, not a warrior, not even a tribesman, just a starving boy in the middle of nowhere, clutching at frostbitten dreams. Your clan, the Borjigin, waste no time abandoning you, your mother, and your 6 siblings like leftover bones tossed to the wolves. No protection, no provisions, no political favours, just wind and silence. You're left to die on the steppe, and it's not even personal, it's just how things are done. Welcome to Mongol politics. Your mother Holan doesn't cry. She doesn't scream. She tightens her belt, rips up her dignity, and becomes a human mule. She digs for roots, traps rats, chews leather into soup. She tells you not to whimper, because whimpering attracts crows and cowards. You all live like wild animals. Less, even. Wild animals don't have lice, broken teeth, and vendettas. You're cold. You're hungry. And most of all, you're angry. At first, you don't understand what happened. You don't grasp that the world doesn't care, that tribal alliances aren't sealed with oaths, they're sealed with meat, blood, and leverage, and your family, fresh out of all 3. So you begin to learn. You learn that frozen berries can kill you if you eat the wrong ones. You learn that horse dung burns better than firewood. You learn that stealing is survival, that mercy is weakness, and that no one, not one living soul, will save you if you don't save yourself first. You also learn about Bekta. He's your older half-brother, technically next in line to lead what's left of your family. He's big, he's strong, and worst of all, he's hoarding food. One day you see him sneak a dried fish from under his coat while your little brothers suck frost off their fingers to pretend it's soup. Something in you snaps. You and your younger brother Kassar don't say much. You don't need to. You string your bow. You approach Bekta like it's a ritual, and you kill him. Just like that. 1 arrow, centre chest. A quiet revolution of 1. It's not poetic, it's not heroic, it's just necessary. Later you'll justify it. Say it was about justice, leadership, destiny. But for now, you're just a boy standing over a corpse, waiting to see if your mother will hate you. She doesn't. She doesn't say anything, actually. Just drags Bekta's body to the river and mutters something about waste. That night, you don't sleep. You just stare at the stars, wondering how many men you'll have to kill to feel full. That number, for the record, will be in the tens of millions. But before you become a conqueror, you have to become a survivor. And surviving on the Mongolian steppe in the 12th century? That's a full-time job with no breaks, no benefits, and a 99% death rate. You're dodging wolves, rival clans, frostbite, starvation, and your own damn relatives. One night, you wake up to find your horse dead from the cold. You eat part of it, bury the rest. Say nothing. The next day you walk 50 miles to find water. You're not trained in warfare. You're trained in don't die. You can read animal tracks better than faces. You can fish with twine. You can gut a marmot in under 2 minutes with a dull knife and 0 complaints. And still, you're thin as a reed, your ribs playing a concerto every time you cough. Then comes your next lesson in Mongol hospitality. You're captured. It's the Taichiud tribe, one of the many who didn't appreciate your dad's ambitions. They throw you in a shackle called a kangwei, basically a wooden yoke that locks around your neck like a medieval sandwich board. It's heavy, humiliating, and cuts into your skin with every move. You can't lie down, you can't run, you can barely breathe. They parade you like a prize. Their message is clear. This is what happens to upstart bloodlines. You're 12, but you're also observant. One day, when the guards are drunk on airag and arrogance, a young servant takes pity on you. You whisper a promise to him. Friendship, reward, future glory. He releases you. You run. You disappear into the brush like a ghost, kangi and all. Later you'll track down every man who imprisoned you, and you'll show them that wooden collars are nothing compared to what revenge can do. You return home scarred, hardened, but alive. And strangely, things begin to change. You reconnect with your childhood friend Jamuka, a rising warlord with his own gang of steppe psychos. Together you form an alliance, hunt together, raid together, eat fermented curds and laugh around the fire like nothing's wrong. But something is always wrong. Because deep down you know this won't last. You want unity. Not just for your family, for everyone. You want to bind the steppe not with terror, but with loyalty. You start attracting misfits, outcasts, former enemies. You give them rank based on talent, not birth. You reward courage, not connections. You make people believe in you, not because of your name, but because of your vision. And for a moment it works, until Jamuka turns. He doesn't like your ideas, says you're polluting Mongol tradition, says you're a threat, and just like that your oldest friend becomes your first real enemy. He raises an army, you raise one too, and now it's personal. You clash. Hard. It's a brutal war. Horses scream, arrows darken the sky, men die by the hundreds, and when you win, you don't celebrate. You execute Jamuka's generals by boiling them alive. Because this is the steppe. Mercy is for bedtime stories. You don't have time to feel guilty, only to grow, to conquer, to adapt. You begin forging alliances with distant tribes, Chinese states, even traders along the Silk Road. You're no longer Temujin the Exile. You are Genghis Khan, master of the winds, lord of the open plains. But somewhere in the back of your mind you're still that starving boy watching your half-brother steal a fish, still chewing leather, still dreaming of a world where nobody gets abandoned for being weak. And that's what makes you so dangerous, because you never forgot how it felt, and you never will. Now, as your power spreads and your legend grows, let's move forward to the next chapter. The rise of your war tactics, your terrifying military discipline, and how you weaponized fear as an empire-building tool. So you want an empire, not a dusty banner, not a carved-up chiefdom, not even a nice trade route with silk and exotic spices. You want a machine, something that can roll over mountains, incinerate cities, and rewrite the world map with hoofbeats and fire. But here's the rub. You can't do it alone. You need men. Not just any men. Warriors who'll charge headlong into spears, sleep standing up and survive on a thimble of goat blood and a whispered grudge. And guess what? You've got them. Because the Mongol steppe doesn't breed softness. It breeds fury, desperation, and thighs like steel cables from all the horseback riding. Still, this isn't a ragtag band of raiders anymore. This is your army, your war machine. And to make it work, you start with the most revolutionary idea since saddle stirrups. Merit over birth. You don't care if someone's a noble son or a yak herder's third cousin. If he can shoot a bird out of the sky at full gallop and quote battle poetry while gutting a man, he's in. Loyalty, discipline, and ferocity. That's the only entrance exam. You tear down tribal favoritism and replace it with raw, weaponized meritocracy. And that terrifies the old clans. Because they know the second you give a poor man power, he'll never forget who gave it to him. Your military structure is like a pyramid made of rage. Tens, hundreds, thousands. Every 10 men have a leader. 10 of those make 100, then 1,000, then 10,000, what you call a two-man. It's efficient, it's scalable, it's deadly. Each unit trains, lives and dies together. If one man deserts, the other 9 are executed. It's ruthless, but it works. Because nothing bonds a group faster than the knowledge that if one idiot screws up, everyone dies. Your warriors don't need glory. They need meat, revenge, and a decent saddle. You train them with brutal repetition. Ride, shoot, dismount, stab, remount, and repeat until the horse stops complaining. You teach them to fire arrows while galloping backward, to fake retreats, to feign weakness. You turn trickery into doctrine. This isn't cavalry. This is psychological warfare in motion. The Mongol bow is your scalpel, made from layers of wood, horn and sinew. It's small but monstrous. Your men can hit a target at 200 meters while bouncing on a galloping horse in a blizzard. European knights with their long swords and clunky armour might as well be statues compared to your kill squads. And you don't just fight battles, you choreograph them. Ambushes, encirclements, multi-day feigned withdrawals that bait the enemy into overextending. Then, like a silent sandstorm, your troops slam in from all sides. It's not war, it's predation. Organised, elegant destruction. And while your enemies argue about honour and formation, you burn their fields, poison their wells, and bribe their gatekeepers. Here's the thing most people don't understand about you. You don't love violence. You love results. You're not evil. You're efficient. But you understand one essential truth better than anyone else in history. Fear is faster than arrows, so you weaponize it. You send advance riders ahead of your armies not to scout, but to spread dread. Stories of entire cities being wiped from the earth, of heads stacked in pyramids, of infants impaled on spears. Is all of it true? Doesn't matter. The fear works before the first arrow is even notched, and when a city resists, you make an example. You crush it. You spare no one. You leave 1 or 2 survivors, broken, raving, and you send them ahead to the next city, like a plague in human form. Sometimes entire cities surrender the moment your banners appear on the horizon. They open the gates, offer you gold, women, livestock, poetry. You take it, you smile, you leave them standing, and the next city wonders, will we be the lucky ones? You don't need to sack every city. You just need enough skull pyramids to keep the rest in line. But your genius doesn't stop at warfare. You know the value of knowledge. You recruit Chinese siege engineers, Persian map makers, and anyone who can help you crack fortified walls or run a better postal relay. You're not just building an army. You're building an infrastructure of terror. And you never, ever attack without a plan. You send spies, diplomats, and scouts. You map every hill, river, and water source. You sabotage supply lines. You find the cracks, and then you pry them open with arrows and bone hooks. By now the world is starting to whisper your name, not with praise, with horror. Because you're not just a warlord, you're a system, a storm front with a playbook, an industrialized force of nature wrapped in leather, grit, and raw ambition. You've built something the world has never seen. Something that moves faster, hits harder, and endures longer than any army in existence. And the only thing more dangerous than what you've built is what you're planning next. Because now that you've unified the Mongol tribes, now that you've turned fear into fuel and warriors into an ideology, it's time to expand. Westward, eastward, everywhere. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet, because before you can take on Persia, Russia, and the Song dynasty, you've got to become a ruler. A real one. Not just a war commander, but a lawmaker, a judge, and a father to an empire. And believe me, governing an empire of ruthless nomads is a lot harder than conquering it. So roll out your felt carpets, sharpen your laws, and prepare to establish a code that'll outlive your bones. You conquered the steppe. You bled and clawed and crushed your way through tribes and traitors. You built an army that breathes fire and speaks in arrows. And now, sitting atop a mountain of bones and loyalty, you're finally the Khan of Khans. But here's the part they never warn you about. Ruling is harder than killing. Because it's one thing to win a war. It's another to keep warriors from stabbing each other in the back over a goat. You can't just gallop everywhere swinging a saber and expect harmony. You've united nomads, raiders, outcasts, herders and killers under one tent, and every last one of them has a cousin they're plotting revenge on. The glue holding your empire together, it's you, your fear, your charisma, your horse sweat. But fear fades, charisma dies with the flu, and horse sweat is only good for one generation. So you do something mad, something brilliant. You write the rules, you take a deep breath, roll out a hide scroll and start creating something the steppe has never seen. A legal code. You call it the yasa, not written in gold or carved in marble, not even written down at all. This is law delivered orally, memorized by officials, enforced with blades. It's part myth, part mandate, and 100% yours. The yasa isn't about justice, it's about order. You outlaw theft, make sense. Everyone's tired of their best sheep going missing at night. You outlaw adultery, which is ironic considering half your generals are out there drinking fermented mare's milk and flirting with everyone within 3 yurts. You criminalise lying, betrayal, and nobles who act like their ancestors give them special privileges. Because you know exactly how dynasties rot. From the inside, with too much wine and not enough consequence. And then you do the big one. You outlaw blood feuds. On the steppe, that's sacrilege. Blood debts are sacred. If someone kills your cousin, you kill their cousin's cousin's goat and burn down their gear for good measure. But you break that cycle. You replace personal vengeance with centralised punishment. Now, if someone slays your brother, you don't rally your kin. You report it to the officials who mete out Khan-approved justice, which is to say, brutal, immediate, and publicly humiliating. Heads roll, literally. People get the message. But the yasa isn't just fear and fire, it's strangely fair. You protect envoys, you encourage trade, you punish looting without permission. Your code respects diversity. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, shamans, all can practice freely as long as they pledge loyalty to you. You even offer tax exemptions for holy men and doctors. You're not interested in religion. You're interested in function. If a man can pray, heal, or organise, he's valuable. If he can't, he better be good with a bow or willing to shovel manure. This legal system is wild to your enemies. Europeans think you're savages. The Chinese think you're brutes. But behind that barbarian facade is a government more efficient than half their kingdoms. Your postal system, lightning fast. Your census taking, shockingly detailed. Your tax system, ruthless and surprisingly equitable. You establish ranks of deciders, officials who travel from camp to camp, inspecting livestock, resolving disputes, collecting levies. They're feared, respected, and sometimes lynched if they overstep. But hey, you never promised them a long life. And to keep everyone on the same moral leash, you sprinkle in a few theatrical laws. If someone urinates in water, death. If someone eats without offering to their neighbour first, death. If someone disrespects a horse, okay, maybe not death, but definitely exile and a very long lecture from the local animal shaman. You're not aiming for modern liberal values here. You're aiming for cohesion. Every law is a brick. Every punishment is mortar. You build a fortress of obedience so strong that even in your absence the empire won't crumble. And here's the twist most history books skip. A lot of your laws are lies. Not lies in the sense of being false. Lies in the sense of being performative. You never wrote them down. No one ever found an official copy of the Yasa. Some scholars even debate if it existed as a codified document. But that's the beauty of it. You made it so legendary, so terrifying, that even the whisper of its enforcement kept cities in line. Genghis Khan's law, they'd say, eyes wide, better not cross it. It was myth as governance, soft propaganda wrapped in hard steel, and it worked. You created unity not by stamping out difference, but by replacing it with your vision of order. Your law was the great equalizer. Under the Yasa, a beggar and a prince could hang just the same, and in a world addicted to privilege that was revolutionary. But you knew laws alone wouldn't hold an empire, so you created loyalty rituals, public ceremonies of submission, ranks, rewards. You made your followers wear belts of honour, swear oaths under the eternal blue sky, cry at your feet while swearing to serve the Khan's bones even in death. You made obedience spiritual, and when one of your own sons got cocky, when a blood relative thought he could ignore your orders, you didn't flinch. You demoted him, publicly, harshly, because no one is above the Yasa, not even those who share your blood, especially not them. And if you think enforcing laws on warriors is hard, wait till you try enforcing them on the next generation. Sons who grew up rich, daughters married to foreign princes, nephews with too much mead and not enough war scars. But that's another story. Right now you've built something unthinkable, a mobile, multicultural, multi-ethnic empire glued together by fear, respect, and whispered law. You didn't just conquer with arrows, you conquered with systems, and as your empire grows, as cities fall and caravans flow, your name becomes less a person and more a force. But maintaining power isn't your only problem, because now your enemies have stopped underestimating you. They've started organising. Next up, you'll cross paths with a Persian empire that calls you a barbarian and kills your envoys. And when that happens, you'll show the world exactly what happens when someone breaks your laws. You tried to be nice. No, really. After all the screaming and slashing and smashing that made you Genghis Khan, the name that makes horses whimper and kings wet themselves, you actually tried diplomacy. Big mistake. See, you had this idea. What if trade made more sense than conquest? What if, instead of razing every city between your yurts and the Caspian Sea, you sent a friendly caravan to Persia? You even put shiny gifts in it. Silks, precious metals, your best rug weavers. A solid show of good faith. You expected gratitude, or at least respect. What you got was murder. The Shah of Khwarizm, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, didn't just insult you. He butchered your envoys, executed your merchants, burned your message, spit in your metaphorical face. It wasn't just bad manners, it was a declaration of war wrapped in arrogance. And so, you did what any reasonable, calculated emperor would do. You lost your mind. You don't just declare war, you declare the end of his entire civilization, a blood reckoning so thorough that it becomes a bedtime story in 4 different languages. You summon your generals, Subutai, Jebe, your sons, and deliver one command. Wipe them from the map. This is not a campaign. It's a funeral procession. Your armies descend upon Khwarizm with precision, like a vulture on a rotting hare. And here's where the story stops being a war and starts becoming legend. You don't ride in screaming with your banners flapping. You strike like a ghost. Your spies have already infiltrated the cities. Your scouts know the terrain better than the locals. You flood the steppe with tens of thousands of horsemen who eat in the saddle, sleep standing up, and can hit a falcon from 100 yards away. Bukhara falls first, a walled city, fortified, confident, then suddenly surrounded by cavalry and smoke. The people panic. The walls crumble under siege machines your enemies didn't even know you had. And then you do what you're famous for. You walk into the mosque, stand on the pulpit, and announce to the crowd that Allah did not send this punishment. You did. You don't steal their religion, you hijack it. Then Samarkand, bigger, richer, more soldiers. Doesn't matter. The defenders climb the walls, hurl rocks, shout prayers. Your men scale the walls anyway. You don't just kill fighters, you kill fear. You smother it until obedience is the only thing left breathing. Tens of thousands die. Those who resist are slaughtered. Those who surrender, well, sometimes they live. Sometimes they're used as human shields in your next siege. Because you're not just waging war. You're waging psychological apocalypse. The Shah panics. He flees city after city, chased by dust clouds and dread. He runs to the edge of his empire, shedding armour and titles like a snake trying to wriggle out of judgment. Finally, he dies on a remote island in the Caspian Sea, sick, alone, and very much not a king anymore. But you're not finished. You turn to the people who helped him, those who supported his reign, the governors, the generals, the cities that stood too long before surrendering. One by one, they're levelled. In Nishapur, one of your wives, possibly a daughter-in-law, is killed by rebels. So you give the order, kill everyone. Men, women, children, cats probably. They say your troops stacked skulls outside the gates into pyramids, literal monuments to vengeance. Herat, gone. Merv, razed. Urgench, flooded and burned. These weren't just cities. They were thriving centres of trade, science, poetry. Now, footnotes. You don't just flatten Persia, you erase it. The rivers run red, the sand grows quiet. And what makes it even more terrifying is your cold precision. You don't massacre for chaos, you massacre for policy. You're sending a message, don't kill my envoys. It's not about bloodlust, it's about rules. You gave them a chance to respect your empire, to join peacefully. They responded with arrogance. You responded with extinction. And then you did the unthinkable. You moved on. No occupying force, no taxation, no governing bureaucracy, just ruin. You disappear back into the east, leaving Persia broken, burned, and utterly confused about what just happened. Scholars centuries later still argue about the death toll. 2 million? 10 million? Nobody knows for sure. You didn't leave paperwork. You left ashes. And what did you gain? A reputation. From Baghdad to Beijing, your name becomes the curse people whisper when the sky darkens. Mothers use your name to scare children into eating their lentils. You become the reason walls are built taller. Cities sleep with one eye open. Kings double their guards and still sweat through the night. Because you weren't just a conqueror. You were a force of nature. But even forces of nature have to rest. You ride home through the steppe. Your war horses limping, your men filthy but rich with loot. You say little, but inside you know you've changed the world map, and you've set a precedent. Betrayal means obliteration. There's no Geneva Convention in your playbook. There's the Khan's law, the Khan's wrath, and sometimes, when necessary, the Khan's silence. But there's little time to reflect, because the next challenge won't be the Persians, it'll be your own family. Infighting, succession disputes, greedy sons and scheming wives. And keeping the empire whole, that might be your greatest test yet. South, you've levelled Persia, conquered most of Central Asia, and terrified the known world into silence. You'd think that by now, after becoming Genghis freaking Khan, your biggest problem would be finding space in your yurt for all the tribute gold. But no, your real nightmare, your own family, because being the Khan of the largest land empire in history apparently doesn't come with a manual for managing sons with egos bigger than your empire, or wives who've memorized every loophole in your marriage treaties. Let's rewind. You have 4 official sons by your primary wife, Berta: Yochi, Chagatai, Ogadei, and Tolui. And on paper, this should be easy. Big dad energy, clear succession plan, everybody gets a slice of the empire pie. But there's a catch. Yochi might not be your son. See, Berta was kidnapped early in your marriage and held captive for months by another tribe. You rescued her, yes, but when Yochi was born not long after, whispers followed. Was he yours, or someone else's? You claimed him as your own, publicly, but privately. That doubt clung to everything, especially for Chagatai. He made it known, loudly and often, that he didn't consider Yochi legitimate, called him a bastard, questioned his right to rule, made dinner conversations awkward for everyone. And you needed unity, not family drama. You're trying to rule an empire, not host a Mongol episode of Keeping Up with the Khans. You tried to keep the peace, gave Yochi control of the western campaigns, far from the bickering heart of the court. Let him conquer distant lands, build his own power base. Meanwhile, Chagatai ran operations in the east, and Ogadai, less dramatic but fond of wine, hovered in the middle. But the tension never left. Yochi stopped showing up to court, started ignoring your summons. There were rumours. He was planning to rebel or secede. Some said he was forming alliances with Turkic tribes under your nose. You sent envoys, then threats, then silence. And then he died. You never saw him again. Some said you poisoned him. Others said he died of illness or heartbreak. You never corrected the rumours. You didn't have to. Either way, problem solved. One less rival to the throne. But that came with a cost, because now his sons, especially Batu, were going to remember. Long. Meanwhile, Chagatai, loudmouth, traditionalist, obsessed with law, still wasn't your favourite. Too inflexible, too arrogant. You needed someone smart, diplomatic, ruthless when necessary, but calm under pressure. So who did you pick as your successor? Ogadei, 3rd son, moderate temperament, drank like a dying goat, but somehow kept it together. You named him the next great Khan, not because he was the best warrior, but because he was the least likely to rip the empire apart. Still, even this caused waves. Chagatai wasn't happy. Tolui, your youngest and arguably most competent son, was powerful, commanding elite troops and overseeing heartland territories. Many thought he should rule, but you didn't want the strongest. You wanted the most manageable, so you made a deal. Chagatai gets the east, Tolui gets central control, and Ogadei becomes Khan when you die. You even made your generals swear allegiance to him in advance, just to lock it down. Crisis averted? Ha! Not even close. Behind the yurt curtains, the power plays continued. Your wives, remember, you had many, were playing their own games. Because in Mongol politics, royal women didn't sit quietly and sew slippers. They arranged marriages, commanded troops, ran tribute systems, and plotted succession with chessmaster skill. Berta's influence was waning, but her lineage, through Ogadei and Tolui, still held prestige. Your other wives, especially the ones you married for political alliances, had their own sons and their own ambitions, and every one of them had supporters, generals, tribal leaders, shamans. The moment you showed weakness, they'd be ready. But you never showed weakness. Even when your health started to fail, you were in your 60s, which by steppe standards was Methuselah territory. Your body ached. Old battle wounds throbbed in the cold. You'd seen 1,000 men die under your command and buried a few friends of your own. But you had one last job to do. Keep the family from imploding. You held councils, reinforced laws, expanded the yasa, your sweeping legal code, so that even your grandchildren couldn't screw things up too quickly. You made succession feel inevitable. Still, in your heart, you knew. Empires are easy. Families are chaos. You could burn a city to the ground in 3 days. But managing 4 power-hungry sons and a dozen manoeuvring wives for 3 decades, That took miracles. And deep down, you feared this truth, that your real legacy wouldn't be the empire you built, but how fast your children would break it. But that's for another day, because for now your family drama has to take a back seat. You've got an empire to expand, and your scouts have returned with word of the great Song dynasty in China. Silk, spice, scholars, cities made of gold, and just enough arrogance to make them think they're safe. Which brings us to the next part of your journey. You thought the West was brutal. You burned Persia, outwitted the Khwarezm Empire, and scattered Russian princes like spooked goats in a thunderstorm. But now your horse hooves turn east again, toward the Song dynasty, toward the south, toward silk-robed diplomats with perfect calligraphy and perfectly hidden daggers. And this time, it's not brute strength you'll need, it's patience. The Song don't charge into battle. They negotiate you to death, then send you a thank you poem. It begins, as it always does, with a letter, a beautifully written one, courteous, respectful, from the Song Emperor himself. It welcomes trade, suggests friendship, and implies, very subtly, that you should stay right where you are. You've seen this trick before. You reply with your own message, simple, direct, and backed by the threat of 100,000 mounted archers. The Song reply with more poetry. You reply with scouts and siege engineers. The southern campaign has begun. You're not the first Mongol to fight China, but you're the one rewriting the rules. Years earlier, your generals conquered the Jin dynasty to the north. You laid siege to Zhongdu, what will one day be called Beijing, and starved the city until the emperor sent you a princess and a mountain of gold. The Song dynasty, however, is different. They're richer, smarter, more organised, and more annoying. Their cities are fortified like mountains. Their generals wear silk, but don't mistake that for softness. Their bureaucrats wield bureaucracy like a sword, 10 scrolls deep, every action recorded in triplicate, stamped by 5 departments, and delayed by 6 more. You're used to conquering with lightning strikes and fear, but here you run into walls, literally, and so you evolve. You become what they aren't expecting, methodical. Your troops adapt. Engineers from conquered Chinese and Persian territories design siege towers, build mobile trebuchets, and dig tunnels under city foundations. You learn to wait, to wear cities down, to strike when they break. City by city, the south begins to unravel, but not without resistance. The Song counter with guerrilla warfare, ambushes in the mountains, naval raids on your supply lines. You send cavalry into unfamiliar forests and lose men to humidity, disease, and leeches the size of newborn goats. Worse, they try to buy you off. Not with gold, with marriages. Sound familiar? They offer princesses, dowries, alliances sealed with bloodlines. You could say yes. You've said yes before, but you know this game. Take their princess, and they'll expect your armies to stop just short of the capital. Marry into their family, and suddenly they're your in-laws, not your targets. You decline. You want their cities, not their daughters. But even Genghis Khan can't fight forever. The southern terrain is punishing. Your armies are used to speed, not swamps. Your horsemen complain. Your generals grow cautious. Even your shamans start getting nervous. Omens say the spirits are restless in the south. So you pause, and you try something revolutionary, negotiation. You propose terms, tribute, shared rule, open trade, and they ignore you. Instead, they write songs, glorious songs, about song resistance, about the northern barbarians kept at bay. They print pamphlets mocking your ancestry. They commission plays where you're portrayed as a hairy, unwashed brute who eats his generals when bored. You're not amused, so you try a new strategy. Divide and conquer. You bribe southern warlords, offer autonomy to rebellious governors. You let whispers of disloyalty rise through the cracks in the Song court, and it works. Their unity splinters. Border provinces stop sending taxes. Generals stop following orders. Some defect to you. Your forces sweep through. Still, it's not easy. One city, Xiangyang, holds out for years. It becomes a symbol of resistance, a fortress on a river, with walls taller than your siege towers and defenders who refuse to quit. You throw everything at it. Siege weapons, blockades, psychological warfare. You catapult decapitated heads over the walls just to ruin dinner. Nothing breaks them. It's a war of attrition, and the south is bleeding slower than you'd hoped. But you're not here for fast wins anymore. You're here for legacy. Eventually it breaks. You take the city. Then another. Then another. You're not burning them to ash this time. You're installing governors, tax collectors, administrators. You're ruling, which frankly is more exhausting than conquest. And it takes its toll, and you're not young anymore. Your hands hurt when you draw your bow. You cough more than you used to. Your nights are filled with dreams, some of glory, some of regret. You think about your sons, your grandsons, about what they'll inherit. But for now, you still ride, you still command. And the song? They're no longer writing poems about your defeat. Now they're writing treaties. So when the final emissary arrives, kneeling, offering full submission of a province, you let him live. Because the conquest of China isn't just about blood. It's about patience, about adapting, about understanding that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it moves like a shadow through silk curtains. And that's a lesson no one expected you, the barbarian on horseback, to teach. Now you're heading north again. There's trouble brewing on the western edge of your empire. Your grandson is getting cocky, your eldest is dead, and rumours say the Russians still haven't learned their lesson. You thought you were the storm, but it turns out you were just the beginning. Because while you built an empire on horseback, your grandkids, the ones who grew up hearing tales of your conquests around campfires, drinking fermented mare's milk and pretending their ponies were war beasts, they turned your empire into something even more terrifying, a machine, a gilded, arrow-laced, tax-hungry machine called the Golden Horde. And you're the ghost in their blood, the whisper in their bones, the face on every banner they raise. It starts with Batu, one of your favourite grandsons, not as brilliant as Subutai, not as philosophical as Ogadai, but Batu has something better, momentum. After your death, when the empire splits into 4 Khanatirs like an angry hydra, Batu gets the western chunk, everything from the Volga River to the ends of Europe. He calls it the Golden Horde. Sounds majestic, right? Don't let the name fool you. It's not because they liked shiny things. The golden referred to the royal tent of Batu, literally a gilded yurt, and the horde comes from the Turkic Mongol word ordu, meaning camp. But let's be honest, to everyone else it meant something far simpler. Death was coming, and it was wearing lamella armour and shouting in a language you didn't understand. Batu doesn't waste time. He charges into Eastern Europe like a plague with better aim. Russia first. Novgorod and Kiev burn like parchment in a brazier. Churches, castles, farms, it all becomes kindling under hoof. The Russian princes are crushed so thoroughly they spend the next 2 centuries paying taxes to men who don't even bother learning their names. And then comes Hungary. You ride with them, in spirit. You feel it in every war drum. Batu and Subutai. Yes, your old warhound is still going. Split their army into coordinated columns, not just for shock and awe, but for pure logistical brilliance, like arteries pumping destruction through a continent. They coordinate ambushes hundreds of miles apart, cross rivers during snowstorms, and they don't just fight soldiers, they annihilate entire systems, burn the roads, seize the livestock, ransom the nobles, enslave the craftsmen. Europe had never seen warfare like this. At the Battle of Moe in 1241 they flattened the Hungarian army like a tent flap in a windstorm. Archers carve through armour, siege weapons crush cathedrals. The king barely escapes with his crown, and Europe, Christian, civilized, and completely out of its depth, panics. Pope Gregory IX declares a crusade against you. even though you're already dead. That's how bad it is. Europe isn't just fighting your grandkids, they're fighting your legacy, your ghost. But then, they stop. Just when it looks like Batu will carve a highway of fire from Vienna to Paris, he turns around and rides back to the steppes. Why? Because Ogedai, your son, the great Khan, just died. And Batu, like a good Mongol, knows that succession is sacred. He needs to attend the Kurultai, the Grand Council that elects the next Khan, so Europe gets a break. Not because they beat you, but because Mongol family drama took precedence over total annihilation. The Golden Horde doesn't disappear though, it settles in, sets up shop on the Volga River, builds a capital at Sarai, full of merchants, mosques, markets and tax offices that run more efficiently than half the kingdoms of Europe. The Mongols become rulers, bureaucrats, paper pushers with a penchant for cavalry. And here's the twist. They don't try to erase the lands they conquer. They let the Russians keep their religion, their language, even their princes, so long as those princes kneel and pay their tribute in silver and submission. They rule through fear, yes, but also through structure. They reinvent the postal system, standardize weights and measures, guarantee safe passage for traders across an empire so vast it takes months to cross. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Baghdad. It flows through the Golden Horde like water through a well-designed canal. You never cared much for cities. But your descendants, they run them like CEOs with a blood-soaked resume. But it's not all smooth. Some grandsons want to go full nomad again. Others want to sip wine in tiled palaces and quote Persian poetry. Factions emerge. The unity you died for starts to crack. But for now, the Golden Horde still holds. And its impact? Immense. They shape Russia's political spine, encourage trade from Venice to Korea, influence military strategies for centuries to come. Even their absence is felt. When the Horde weakens, power vacuums shake Eurasia like an earthquake. You may be long gone, but your shadow, your children's children, and the systems they built in your name are still thundering across history. And next, they'll ride south, toward Baghdad, toward the House of Wisdom, toward a library that holds the knowledge of centuries, and the flames that will turn parchment into ash. You'd think by now the world would have learned to tremble when the Mongols started sharpening blades. But in 1258, the mighty city of Baghdad, the crown jewel of the Islamic world, the home of the famed House of Wisdom, where scholars debated stars and scribes copied text older than Christianity, thought it would be different, thought it was too cultured, too sacred, too important to fall like the rest. You know better. Your grandson Hulagu Khan doesn't ride to Baghdad with a caravan of diplomats. He brings a wall of horsemen so vast it looks like the earth itself is moving. Men from every corner of your empire, Chinese engineers, Persian sappers, Mongol cavalry, even Christians from Armenia and Georgia, who decided helping the Mongols was better than becoming firewood. By this point you're long dead, of course, but your name still rides at the front of every campaign, like a curse etched into the wind. The world remembers what you did to Khwarezm, what you did to Samarkand. Hulagu learner from the best. He's just polishing your methods. Now Baghdad, the Abbasid Caliphate, nearly 500 years old, has ruled from here for generations. Once a place of poetry, peace, and power. The Caliph, Al-Mustasim, sits on a throne of silk and denial, confident the Mongols won't dare touch him. Spoiler, they will. You're watching from the afterlife, probably shaking your head. The Caliph refuses to surrender, sends a letter to Hulagu suggesting the heavens will defend the city. Hulagu replies by building siege towers tall enough to touch those heavens and filling them with angry engineers. The siege lasts less than 2 weeks. On February 10th, 1258, the Mongols breach the city, and then the books stop mattering. You've seen bloodbaths before, you waded through them, but Baghdad is something else. The city doesn't just fall, it unravels. The Mongols set fire to homes, mosques, marketplaces, but they don't stop there. They turn their attention to the libraries. Thousands, maybe millions of priceless scrolls and manuscripts, ancient Greek texts translated into Arabic, medical treatises, astronomical charts, the collected knowledge of centuries. What do the Mongols do with it? They toss them into the Tigris River. The ink from the books bleeds into the water. Eyewitnesses claim the river runs black for days, darker than oil, thicker than guilt. It sounds like myth, but it isn't far from truth. When enough knowledge is drowned, even legends feel plausible. The House of Wisdom burns. A place where thinkers once argued about the shape of the earth, where students once memorized entire philosophical treatises, it's reduced to ash and rubble. The Mongols didn't care for intellectual property rights. And then there's the Caliph. You remember the story of how they killed him, right? Not with a sword. No, the Mongols believe that royal blood mustn't be spilled, so they roll him up in a carpet and trample him to death with horses. Call it symbolism. Call it cruelty. Either way, it's textbook Mongol logic. By the time the smoke clears, over 200,000 people are dead. Some say 500,000. Baghdad goes from the beating heart of the Islamic world to a cautionary tale. And yet, Hulagu doesn't stop. He installs a puppet ruler, puts the city under Ilkhanate rule, another of your empire's splintered limbs. The Mongols won't just conquer territory, they'll swallow civilization and spit out something unrecognizable. But here's the kicker. Even amid all that fire and death, the Mongols still adapt. They take Persian advisors, learn to administer from the ruins, build roads, establish postal routes. The next generation of Mongol rulers in Persia will convert to Islam. They'll try to rebuild, to make something out of the ashes. Still, the damage is done. The destruction of Baghdad marks the end of the Islamic Golden Age. No single event turned the tide harder. It's not just buildings that fall, it's identity, science, art. What the Mongols don't burn, they bury. And all of it. Every broken tile, every shattered dome, every silent scribe, is the echo of you. Because Hulagu wouldn't have ridden that far if you hadn't taught him to. Your methods, your ruthlessness, your vision. This was your template. Hulagu just followed the blood trail you left behind. But as Baghdad falls, as the rivers drown in ink and the mosques lie in ruins, something changes. Whispers of resistance start to rise. The Mongols aren't invincible anymore. Word spreads that they can be stopped, that their unity is cracking. The empire is starting to fracture. And next, the story shifts to one last place, one final test. Because while you burned Baghdad, the rest of the world was watching and preparing. You die not on a battlefield, not in a blaze of arrows and legend, but somewhere far quieter. Some say you fell from your horse, others whisper that a bolt of lightning struck you dead. The juiciest rumour? A vengeful princess hid a dagger where no dagger should go. Whatever the truth, your men keep it secret. For weeks they guard your death like a state treasure, even slaughtering everyone they pass to preserve the silence. Because the death of Genghis Khan isn't just the end of a man, it's the beginning of a slow, magnificent unravelling. The Mongol Empire is now the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. From the Pacific coast of China to the Caspian Sea, from the Siberian tundra to the Himalayas, you've stitched together dozens of kingdoms, crushed armies by the hundreds of thousands, and enforced laws so fearsome that a woman could walk from one end of your empire to the other with a bag of gold on her head and not get robbed. But power spread this thin comes with cracks. You see, when you die, you don't leave behind one empire. You leave behind 4. Your sons and grandsons divide the spoils like greedy war gods at a buffet table. There's the Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Golden Horde sweeping through Russia and Eastern Europe. Each branch thinks it's the true heir to your thunder. Each one worships your legacy. just not each other. And that's where things start to go sideways. Your grandson Kublai, the one with the silk robes and love for Chinese poetry, decides to go full imperial. He settles into the luxury of the Chinese court, adopts Confucian advisors, and basically becomes a Chinese emperor in Mongol drag. Mongol traditionalists grumble. They want yurts, not palaces. They want fermented mare's milk, not jasmine tea. Meanwhile, in the West, the Golden Horde has beef with the Ilkhanate. They're supposed to be cousins, but try telling that to their horse archers. They clash over trade routes, tax rights, and occasionally insults delivered via arrow. What was once your unified hammer becomes a collection of hammers, each swinging in different directions. The Pax Mongolica, your once glorious Mongol peace, starts to wobble. It's not that your descendants are weak. On the contrary, Kublai goes on to conquer the Song dynasty. Hulagu torches Baghdad. Batu turns Russian cities into ash. But they're not you. They don't have your brutal charisma, your terrifying unity. They build, they rule, but they don't inspire the same cosmic fear. Then come the outside pressures. China resists assimilation. The bubonic plague sneaks into Mongol caravans and spreads like divine punishment. Trade slows, local rebellions rise, and the communication system you built with such elegance, relay stations, mounted couriers, silk-threaded orders, starts to collapse under its own weight. By the 14th century, the empire is splintering like an old bowstring. The Yuan dynasty loses China, the Ilkhanate vanishes into Persian civil wars, the Golden Horde withers into a nest of feuding warlords. The Chagatai Khanate becomes a forgotten name on a crumbling map. What once felt like the eternal legacy of Genghis Khan becomes a cautionary tale. Historians later call it decentralization. You might just call it inevitable. But here's the strange part. Even as the empire falls, your myth gets bigger. In Persia, your bloodline weaves into nobility. In China, Kublai's court influences architecture and cuisine for centuries. In Russia, the Golden Horde shapes the future Tsar's obsession with absolute rule. In Europe, your name becomes shorthand for apocalypse. And let's not forget, you didn't just pass down blood, you passed down a blueprint, a new model of warfare, a logistics system that would inspire generals centuries later, a postal network that made the ancient world feel strangely modern. You may be dead, but your fingerprints remain on the bones of empires long after the last Mongol warhorse returns to pasture. Even your burial site becomes a legend. They say your funeral procession killed everyone it passed to keep the location secret. Then soldiers rode horses over the grave to hide the tracks. Some say your tomb lies beneath a river, diverted temporarily and returned to its course once the burial was done. No one ever finds it. You vanish the same way you lived, in myth and dust. And now, as the wind howls over the steppes, as the fires of war flicker and fade, as empires rise and fall in the wake of your storm, you rest, not in peace, exactly, but in silence. Because the world didn't just survive a day of being Genghis Khan, it barely survived the centuries after, and as you finally close your eyes, know this: no one ever ruled like you. Not before, not since. You were a shepherd who became a shadow over the earth. Now drift slowly into sleep, just like the empires you left behind. And if you're still awake, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments what forgotten ruler or empire you'd like to step into next. But for now, let the dust settle, let the hooves fall silent, and let the dreams ride quietly across the steppe.